everywhere we go, people want to know who we are and where we come from. So who are you and where do you come from?
So I am Mandy Walsh, and I'm originally from Clondalkin, and I now live in Trim, County Meath, where I've been living for 22 years.
Mandy, we go back a very long time. I think, yeah, it's a long time. Yeah. Probably about 12, 13 years, maybe.
Yeah, probably more.
Yeah. That's because you're in travel and I'm in travel, and that's how we know each other. And we'll talk maybe a little bit about travel at the end, because I kind of want to hear what's going on with you guys. But I always knew there was a backstory to Mandy, or that there was you went through a journey, you walked the walk of some sort of story. So from the very beginning, do you want to tell me about your life?
Yep. Very normal upbringing. 2 sisters, mum and dad, hard workers. And I got a job when I was 15, wanted a job. The girls were all getting jobs in the pubs, and my dad was like, "No, you're not getting a job in the pub, I'll get you a job." So I got a job in a big toy shop in Clondalkin Village, and I was 15, and it was grand, Saturdays and Sundays and odd evening at the weekends, and I thought this was great. And I had loads of friends from there that worked there, and I met Brian. Brian would have been 5 years older than me at the time, so being 15 and 20, we were just friends.
Yeah.
I was obviously still in school, and we'd have great crack and banter at the weekends when we'd be on the same shift, and you kind of realised after a while, you'd be looking to see, was he on? And you'd have a great day, great crack and great fun, and I'd be watching him and all his friends going out on a Saturday night, like they'd be going into town and going to the Globe and Re-Raw, and I didn't even know what these places were. I was 15, 16, 17, this type of thing. And then it came to my Debs, and he was saying, "Are you bringing me to your Debs?" And I was like, "No, you're mad," because he was all into the Doors and that kind of music scene and stuff like that. And he used to slag me, saying I'd wear a pale blue suit and a frilly shirt and all this, and I was like, no.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I mean, even my mum said it to me, "Would you not bring Brian to your Debs?" No, I'll get someone or whatever. So that was fine. And then when I was about 18, he left the shop to go work for HMV.
Right.
And I remember I was going, it was sad. It was like, oh God, And a few months later, it was New Year's Eve, and there was a big disco in the GAA club New Year's Eve, and his brother was working in the shop at the time. And I remember saying, "Well, Brian and his friends, are they going tonight?" And he was like, yeah. So myself and Brian.
Did you get dolled up going then?
Oh, dolled up. The black knee-high boots, and the white shirt, and the tartan skirt, the whole shebang. I was tiny, and Brian was quite tall and broad. He was a big guy, so ended up with Brian. So started going out with him. It was just normal, relationship. Go to the cinema, and I was in college, and I left then to go to live in England. I did 2 years in college here, and then I went over to Buckinghamshire College in High Wycombe to do a degree in travel management. And it was hard, and I remember the day I left, I was driving my mum's car at the time, and Brian didn't drive, and I dropped him to HMV in the square in Tala, and came back to the house. I was roaring, crying. My mum was like, "He dumped you, didn't he?" I was like, "No, he didn't." Yeah. So I commuted back and forth. He came over. He'd save his money. Actually, only recently, because I put a lot of stuff away. I found all the letters that he wrote to me when I lived in England, and I only found them really recently. Oh my God. And I was reading them, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And they were so funny. He telling me about, because he used to go to all these, launches of albums, and The Prodigy and all of this, so he'd get to go to all of that being in HMV, and I was reading all these letters and who he was with, and then he'd be telling me about the lads and the girls and who was after having a row with who, and I was like, oh my God, I'd forgotten all of this, and life was good. We bought our first house in 2000, and I was, what age was I at the time? 26 or whatever. Happy out. We bought a house in Trim. Brian was obsessed with Braveheart. He'd gone to see Braveheart about 8 times in cinema. And we had looked at a couple of houses, other places, and decided, Trim is for us. Right. And moved into our house in Trim. He changed jobs in the prior to this as well, and he was now a prison officer in Mountjoy.
Okay.
So very different.
Yeah.
Lots going on. I was still doing travel. Still, I was pretty much doing the same thing. But he had a good few changes, and that was a huge change for us.
Yeah.
There was things that were different, like for when we'd go out and we'd have to leave somewhere. He'd say to me, "We have to go."
Okay.
And you'd go, "Really?" The girls in the gang would be like, "Why are you leaving?" Brian says, "We have to go," and they understood, and it was just the way that it was. He'd say to me, "Look, there's somebody here, and they've already made comment as to who I am and what I do." So he would be very protective of me.
Yeah.
He was, and he said, "I don't want that ever."
Were you scared at all?
No, I never used to be scared because I suppose being that bit younger than him, I would have very much not that I it wasn't me because I was younger. I still very much I admired him, and I knew his first thoughts would be me.
Yeah.
And that would be fine, and
were you scared for him when he going to go work
we
in the
would
morning?
be, yeah. You would often think and he never used to tell me much. In fairness, he didn't tell me much. He would take his shoes off at the front door. He would never bring his shoes into the house that he wore in there. And he'd leave them in the boot of the car, and
okay.
It was like he was leaving it outside, and he made some amazing friends in there, and he was only there for a couple of years. And one day, it was August the 15th, 2002. I'll never forget. It was a scorcher, blue skies, normal day in work. He'd been feeling unwell a couple of weeks beforehand, and he'd gone to the doctor, and the doctor said to him, "Take a couple of weeks off work. You're probably a bit stressed, And he took about a week off work, and then Brian, being Brian, was like, "I'm grand and I'm bored, and we've bills to pay and a car to pay." It's like, I'm going to go back to work. And we'd gotten engaged only on the Christmas day beforehand, and we'd, booked the wedding and everything, and he'd be conscious of that, whereas I used to be more like, "Sure, it'll be grand."
Yeah.
But he would worry.
Yeah.
And he went back to work, and that morning, about 6, half 6, he stood at the end of the bed, and he said, "I'm, feeling much better, and, mightn't go to the gym at lunchtime, but sure, I'll chat to you later." And he rang me during morning break, maybe 9, half 9 or whatever, and he gave me an inquiry for one of the lads for a honeymoon.
Right. Okay.
And this is how we were, and back in the old day, where you took down the inquiries with pen and paper.
Yeah.
We were only getting into emails 20 years ago, I suppose. And I said, "Yeah, grand." He said, "I ring you at lunchtime," and I said, "Grand, I'll have it ready. I'll give you all the details." So a couple of hours later, he rang me, and the first thing I said was, "Oh my God, I haven't got it done yet. It's not lunchtime." And I told you lunchtime. He says, No, I'm feeling much better. I'm going to go to the gym.
Right.
He says, "I'll get it off you during my tea break." But it was about 4 o'clock. I says, "Grand, chat to you then." So that was fine. We used to close the shop from 1 to half 1. We used to have a lunch half hour.
Yeah.
And I was working at the time in Dunshaughlin Travel in Dunshaughlin Village. So it was quite small. And the girl I worked with at the time lived there. So she'd go home at lunchtime.
Okay.
And she'd go up the road and whatever. And we'd lock the shop for the half an hour, and I'd have my sandwich at the desk or whatever. But on this day, a customer had come in who was actually a colleague of Brian's, and he was collecting his tickets.
Yeah.
She went off, and I, did my thing, and I was giving out the tickets and whatever, and the phone in the office started to ring, and I ignored it. And then my mobile began to ring, and I turned it over, and it was one of the lads from the job again. And I remember saying to the guy in front of me, "Sure, it's only such and such. I'll ring him back in a minute." Gave him out his tickets, and off he went. Now, that guy probably remembers everything. I actually don't even remember who he is. A lot of stuff I don't remember, and you'll probably hear me say that a little bit. I think your brain just shuts down stuff that it doesn't need maybe when you go through stuff. So I rang the guy back that had rang my mobile, and I said, "Oh, everything okay? What's up?" thinking it was another inquiry because that's why they used to ring me. And he said, "Look, there's been a bit of an accident in the jail, and we need you to come." And I said, "Okay, still what is it?" And he said, "Oh, do you want me to come get you?" And I said, No, my car's outside the door. I'll be there in half an hour. It's just Dunshaughlin to Phibsborough. And I was like, he says, "Okay, that's fine." Rang my boss, who was in the other branch in Dunboyne, and I said, "Look, I have to go. There's been an accident." He said, "Yeah, go." I said, "Pauline's out on her lunch, be back in half an hour or whatever. So I got into my car and I drove to Phibsborough. And do you know on the Cabot Road, do you know where the McDonald's is on the right hand side? Do you know where the traffic lights are there? The lights went red really suddenly and I had to slam on the brakes because I was a hair's breadth from the car in front of me. And while I was sitting in the car, I just knew Brian was gone.
Did you?
I just got this feeling because I had been thinking, had he been stabbed? Had he been in a fight?
Yeah.
You know, jail-related things were in my head.
Yeah.
And then I realised, sure, he was on his lunch break.
Right.
He was in the gym. You know, I was like, sure, like if he broke his arm or something, like, sure, why would they be calling me? You know? And I just got this I can't explain it, but to this day, I just got this feeling that Brian was gone. And when I drove on and I went through the lights in Phibsborough, I just knew all the guys from his colleagues were all on the road and they were waiting for me. You could just see all the uniforms. And I remember thinking, wow, like, what, you know. And I pulled into the gates and the car door was opened. Don't even remember who. Or, you know, they remember who they were. And they brought me across into the matter. And they were all down the corridors. And I still was like, what is going on? Will someone tell me? And they were like, we don't know, Mandy, we don't know. And I was brought into like kind of what was like an A&E, I suppose, type area. And it was like, you know, it was like stepping into a movie, like a scene from ER or whatever. That's kind of what it felt like. And a nurse came over to me and she says to me, do you know who I am? And I says, yeah, you're my neighbour.
Oh my God.
And she says, yeah, I live 2 doors down from you. But because we were only in our house, say 2.5 years, you know yourself at that age, you go in, you go out. You know, Brian obviously would have seen her more because they'd have been going in and out at the same time in shift work. You know, the 8 to 8 kind of shift that the nurses and you know, the guards and the prison officers all do that kind of same type of shift. Like, you know, so she said, yeah. And she says, I have Brian in here. And she said, you know, just, you know, come in and say hello. And she said, I can't even really remember what she said to me, but she said, you know, you might get a bit of a fright. She said, there's a lot of machines. Still didn't know. I still did not know what was going on. I still didn't know what had happened. And he was on a bed, and like Brian was quite tall and quite broad and very fit, very strong, very healthy, you know. There was just tubes and wires and machines. They were in his throat and in his mouth, and they'd cut off his clothes. And it was just all very surreal and not really known still what's wrong, what has happened, you know. And she handed me his watch, and it was one of those, remember the big Casio G-Shock with a leather strap? But they'd cut it off, and they just handed me his watch. And they handed me his 2 rings, which I put on me that day and never, ever, ever took off. And I've had a few pieces taken out of them so they fit me. And she said, somebody be with you soon. She said, but you need to ring everybody. And I said, okay. And I remember going back outside. I had rang my mum on the way in to say, you know, Brian has had an accident in his job or whatever, so I'll be in touch. So I rang his sister and I said, you need to ring, you know, your mum, your dad and your brother. And I said, I don't know what's wrong. They haven't told me what's wrong. We're waiting to see a doctor, but, you know, you need to get here and then they're going to tell us what's wrong. And I rang my mum, and she only worked on the Long Mile Road at the time, so she got there pretty quick. And we were brought into this room, and when I say it was 2 foot by 4 foot, that's all it was. I remember the doctor in front of me was probably no more than the same age as Brian. It was only 30 at the time. And his sister was at one side of him with her partner and her newborn baby and his little carry thing. She'd only had a baby. And my mum was to my right. And the doctor just looked at me and he said, I'm really sorry, Mandy, but he says, Brian has had a massive subarachnoid brain hemorrhage. I can't even say the word now. And he said, it's a big bleed. He said, Brian probably only has 24 hours left to live. He says, you need to ring all his friends and his family, and they need to come to say goodbye. And it was just, you know, I remember looking at my mum and saying, tell him he's wrong. Like, Mum.
Yeah.
I think my mum just knew. She'd lost her sister a few years before to a brain hemorrhage, and I think when she heard brain hemorrhage, she knew Brian's gone, you know. And his sister said to the doctor, you know, is there anything can we get a second opinion? He said, you can, but he said Brian's brain hemorrhage was really big. He said it to the forefront of the brain. Brian will never speak. Brian will never do anything ever again for himself if he woke up. But we think that in the next 24 to 48 hours, Brian will be gone. And yeah, it was just such... Like,
how old were you?
I was 26. He was 30. I'd only got engaged, as I said, on Christmas Day, and I'd waited so long. Every Christmas, everyone used to say, "Did you get the ring? Did you get the ring?" Nope. You know, we'd actually bought the ring in October in Corfu. And he didn't give it to me on Christmas Day, on Christmas morning. Like, we got up and there was no ring, and I was like, oh my God, knowing that the ring was in the house,
and and he didn't give it to you.
He didn't give it to me, and you know, we went to mass, and I remember it was snowing in Trim that Christmas morning, and all around the castle was white and covered in snow.
Oh my God!
And on the way back from mass, he got down on his knee at Trim Castle and in the snow, took out the ring that I'd been dying to get. And I remember going over to my mum and dad's and saying, you know, I had gloves on, and they were like, well, I was like, no, pretended no.
Yeah.
And then I took off the glove, and yeah, it was just, you know, I suppose we had the life that was simple, it was happy, it was normal, and it all just in seconds. That was it. It was, so we started to ring people. I had to, you know, ring everyone, and oh my God, his friends, my friends, family, they came from everywhere. They came from Limerick, Cork.
God.
Yeah, so he was in ICU. And then after a couple of days in ICU, then they said to me at the hospital, you know, we have to stop people coming. There's just too many. Brian was so well loved by so many people, and he had so many friends in all of his walks of life, from his days in the shop, from the days of HMV, from the days in the jail, his friends from school and college, like and then being in the travel trade as well, I had huge amount of friends, and everyone just wanted to be there for him and for us. And in the end, the hospital, you know, we have to stop them coming. And so he eventually went from ICU into high dependency. Then he went from high dependency into obviously a lower dependency, and then he went into a lower. To be honest, when you think about it now, it was nearly like he was being moved out of the hospital. As the weeks, and I say when the weeks went on. So remember, they said it was 24 to 48 hours. 7.5 weeks later, we were still there. Now, obviously, he'd been moved from each area, and then it got to a point, the 7th week, where the hospital said, we can't provide 24-hour care for Brian anymore, which I didn't think that was a thing. I thought it was a given. I thought, but no. They said, you know, you're going to have to do a rota, you know, get someone to sit with him at night time. And I was like, oh, okay. So in their job, they have a medical aid. Yeah. So the boys from the job were back and forth all the time to me. They were there when I wasn't there with him, and when his family weren't there with him, there was always somebody with him. He was never on his own. And they kind of did what they needed to do, and the medical aid kicked in, and we hired a private agency to sit with him at night time that we had to pay for. Well, the medical aid did, right? So that was fine. And the nurses would come in at night time, and we'd swap over some, you know, and they would be there from, say, maybe 8 or 9 at night till 8 or 9 the next morning, and then myself and his family and friends would kick in during the day. And then the guys said to me, the medical aid needs to stop, like, will stop soon. I was like, but sure, like, what do you mean it'll stop? It's only just started paying because the hospital. So then I was brought over to the governor in the jail. Right. Maybe one afternoon, and I had to plead my case in there and say, please don't take away the medical aid. Like, please leave us with the medical aid. Give me one more week. And he said to me, I don't even remember who the governor was now. he said to me, you know, but you don't know that'll be 1 more week. And I says, I do. I just know. He's not got long left. Just give me 1 more week. And no word of lie, about maybe less than 40 hours later, probably 24 hours later, I went in one morning and the young physios were doing their work on him, where they used to try and bring up the oxygen level, and the little machine was on it and you could see the oxygen rate on the machine, and they were working away. And God love them, he was still so big and strong, it needed 2 of them to turn him over, like even then. And they were working on him for about an hour, and one of the nurses or physios said to me, it's not working. It's, you know, and I looked at him, and he was a different colour that day. He was grey. It was just, I knew it was today. And it was I'm nearly sure it was a Monday. And I rang his mum, and she said, well, we've been here before. And I said, I know, but I said, I just believe, I just know today's different. He looks different. It's today. So, you know, people started to come, and the priest, who was a friend of ours, he worked over in the jail as well, and we had booked him for our wedding and everything. He was in and out, and Father Declan was his name. He was lovely. He actually was good friend with, you know, Stephen from Boyzone, and he conducted that funeral as well. God, yeah. Declan, he was so nice, and he was in and out that day. And to make a sad story even more sadder, my mum and dad were in Manchester that day. My mum's sister, one of her other sisters, had a brain hemorrhage the week before in Manchester while Brian was in his coma from his brain hemorrhage. And they had gotten the ferry to Manchester to bury Lily. And I had to ring my mum and dad and say, will you get the ferry back tonight? God. And come to me, because it's tonight. And about 11:30 that night, they got to the hospital and they said their goodbyes. And
Mandy, just pull that in a little bit to you.
His mum had said, you know, maybe everyone should go home, and, you know, some people went home and others stayed, and there was a room, like a family room, you know, down the corridor, and I would be up and down to the room, and people would be up and down to us. And one of the lads came down to me, and he said, you know, come down and sit with him. And I said, I can't even hold his hand, there's too many people, and I can't. And he says to me, you know, come down. And I went down to the room, and time ticked by, and the nurses came in, and the priest said his prayers, and it was actually quite funny. The nurse was taking his pulse, and she says, he's gone, and then he'd breathe. Oh, God. And this went on for minutes. Yeah, and I started to laugh, and some of the lads started to laugh, because Brian was, if you knew Brian, he was the life and soul of every party. He was the last man standing. He'd, you know, the can of Smittix in his hand and singing the ballads, and he was the last. And I laughed, and I was like, my God, this is so you know. And his aunt was on the other side of the table, and she came around to me and she said to me, there's only one person in this room that can let him go, and it has to be you. She said to me, you need to go up to him, you know, and you need to tell him to leave. So I went up and I whispered in his ear that, Brian, I'll be okay. Time to go. Brian stopped breathing. And that was it, and gone. And look, I'm probably still traumatised from it all. It's 20 years ago this year, which is a lifetime. I've had another life, you know. And I left the room, and I rang my mum and dad, and I rang one of my closest friends. It was 3 of us were friends from school, and I rang one of the girls, and she says, well, I won't ring Fiona till the morning. She said, I'll let her sleep and I'll ring her. And I had rang my mum, and she said, we'll come get you. I says, no, someone will bring me home. And like all the lads, we bring you home. So we lived in Summerhill in Meath at the time, my mum and dad did, and I had obviously moved into their house from the 15th of August, so this is now the 1st of October. And it's a funny story. When Brian worked in HMV one year at Easter time, I worked in the square as well, literally just a few feet away. So my office was there and his was there, and he bought me this bunny rabbit from the Hallmark card shop for Easter. And one of the lads used to say, it looks like it has the mange. Because it was really skinny in the middle. It was this little brown and white rabbit. Like a bunny, like a baby rabbit.
Right.
And this is no word of a lie. We were on our way back to the house, probably about 3 a.m, country road, and Mick, who was from Limerick, one of the lads from the job, slammed on the brakes. I was like, what are you doing? I was half asleep. And it was this little bunny rabbit in the middle of the road, and it just looked at us obviously for a minute because it was dazzled by the lights, and hopped into the bushes. And I just looked at Mick and I says, if only you knew, because obviously he wouldn't have known about the bunny rabbit. And I still have the bunny rabbit.
Oh my God.
But I remember thinking, you'll always mind me. You'll always be there. Yeah, so it was hard. It's still hard. I get upset because people think I haven't moved on. And I have. Of course I have. I did get engaged. I did get married. I do have a beautiful daughter. My marriage didn't work out. Some people will say it's because you still loved Brian. That's probably a huge part of it. But then we were just two different people as well, and that didn't work out. Yeah, I've been single for a very long time. The lads who laugh, they say, sure, he wouldn't want you to be with them. He just loved you, he protected you, he minded you, he worshipped the ground you walked on. Part of him would be glad. People say to me all the time, are you unhappy? I wouldn't say I'm unhappy. Am I happy? Yeah, I'm grand. My job has been a huge part of me from the time I was 17, and even through all that time, even in those 7 weeks that Brian was in the coma, I would still go to work a couple of hours a day.
I wanted to ask you that.
I did, because I needed to as well. I was the manager of 2 shops with 8 or 9 staff, and it was important to me as well, and I couldn't sit there 24/7 anyway. By his side, and I would go in and out, and I'd do a few hours, and then I'd go to the hospital, or I'd go back and I'd do a few hours. And my bosses were amazing. They paid me in full, completely. And then I suppose about a week after he was gone and the funeral and everything was out of the way, they came to me and they said, right, we need you back. And that year, that first year, I will always say it is the hardest year. It's the first of everything. It's the first birthday. Brian actually died on the 1st of October, but his birthday was the 29th of September. So he actually was in a coma on his 31st birthday. And I had given him a surprise birthday on his 30th, which he'd have hated with a passion. And we had the best night. And I always was so grateful that I did that for him. Because even now, the last photos that a lot of people have were at his 30th birthday with him. And the week actually that he actually had the brain hemorrhage, which was the 15th of August, we had 2 or 3 events that week. Okay. Another prison officer actually had died of a brain hemorrhage in Laois, a female prison officer, and we'd been to her funeral, which was horrendous. I think we were at another party for something, and then one of his friends got married, one of his close friends from Clondalkin that been friends all of his life, had actually got married on the Monday and had the brain hemorrhage on the Thursday. So it was nearly it was actually a family wedding that we'd had the weekend before. So it was in that 7 days before Brian had that brain hemorrhage, he'd been with everyone in all kind of sides of his life. If you get me, he'd been with his colleagues, been with a lot of his family, and he'd been with all his school friends and Clondalkin friends. And I just always think, isn't that really strange? That you wouldn't see some of those people from one end of the year to the other, but he'd seen all those people in those 7 days.
So huge shock for all those people.
Yeah, so, and I always say it, I didn't just lose Brian. So many people lost Brian on so many levels. I know to this day that some of his friends still hurt like I hurt. And they still reach out when it's his birthday or my birthday, or they see something that he'd like, or there's a song that he liked, and they'll still message me and they'll still say, wouldn't you loving that? Or you know, and they'll still message me at Christmas, and they'll still say to me, I hurt so much. And they hurt because they know I hurt. But I'd like to think he's proud. I'd like to think he'd give out to me for all the tears. My sister gives out to me all the time. She says, you cry the drop of a hat. And I don't think I used to.
I wouldn't know that about you.
Yeah. Because I can't public speak at all anymore without getting a lump in my throat. I did a lot of networking for years, and that really helped with my speaking. And then I obviously gave that up because I got so busy, and then we obviously have had COVID. So I actually spoke for in public about the last 2 years at our recent travel conference there in November, and that was really hard. And I got to the end without crying. Did you? And the first thing my sister said, did you cry? Yeah. And I went, well, I got through it without crying. Yeah, I know. I don't. You know me as well from work, but you also know me from Facebook. Yeah. And what you see is what you get. I don't really hide stuff. I don't put sad stuff up. You know, I won't put up if I've had a bad night where I've dreamt of Brian and I've woke up in tears, because it still happens. And in fairness, COVID brought a lot back, and it's hard to explain that. But I wrote an article for Image magazine a few years ago, and in that article I said that nobody can take travel from me, and nothing can take travel from me. And as bad as things got when I was grieving, when I was trying to, struggle through life, I would cry in my car, and I still cry in my car. I don't know, it must be like a safe space type thing. But I would see an articulated truck coming the other way, and I'd say, I could just drive out in front of that, and it will end the hurt. I could end this pain by just driving out. And I never did, because I love my family and friends so much, and they love me and they love Brian. And I know that I could never put anyone through any more pain than they've been through. And I just said to myself, you have to dig deeper. You have to find the strength inside you. And you have to keep going, whether it's for you, for him, for my beautiful Ella that I have now. And she wouldn't see this side of me at all, because Brian was before her. Yeah. And she's 14 going on 15, which is, as you know, a hard age as it is. And I hide a lot of stuff. But in saying that I hide it from her. I'll talk to my friends. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I've no shame in my tears. And when I wrote that article, like I said in the article that no one can take travel from me. And then all of a sudden you had COVID. And I went through all those waves of grief again when we locked down that March 2020. I was dreaming of him morning, noon and night. I was waking up. You know when you wake up for that nanosecond that you thought this is a dream, and then you realised it wasn't. So I went through, all the different, the anger, the depression, the shock, the denial, all those, the anger, all the different stages of grief, have hit me at different stages of my life over and over and over again in those 20 years. And yeah, there's not a day go by, I don't think of him. There's not a day goes by that he doesn't cross my mind. And yeah, some people get annoyed. Some people have things to say, and people say, it's not the way to live. You should be. There's more to you. But as I said, I'm happy out. Do you know what I mean? I love what I do. I love what I have. I've worked hard to keep what I have. Whether it's our home, give Ella what. Yeah, she's spoiled rotten. Of course. And I wish she wasn't spoiled. But I'm on my own with Ella since she's 4 and she's nearly 15. So that has brought hard times as well. That was, separation, divorce, all that drama. But Yeah, I do like to say that, you know, by talking about this, say to yourself or to other people, that someone can find some solace in it. You know, I follow a lot of people on social media that have lost people, and, you know, I don't even reach out to them. Because that's not why they're sharing their story. I will often throw a picture up of Brian on my social media. It might just be a picture of us on our Holliers from 20, 25 years ago, and, you know, it's a happy memory. You know, tans and smiles, and, you know, we had our whole lives ahead of us. We had plans, you know, we had dreams. And to look at those photos and to think back to those times, they make me happy. And when I post a picture and people start saying, "Oh, are you okay? Oh, you know, I'm here if you need you." And, you know, yeah, it's fab. But that's not why I do it. I do it because it was a happy moment, and it's a moment where I can look at that picture and go, yeah, you know, we had good times, and I'll never forget them. Like, you know, he was a good guy who did not deserve to go the way that he did, but you're like, who does? He was fit, he was strong, he played rugby for Millmount Rugby Club. He ate chicken and fish. He had a few pints at the weekend like any 30-year-old would have. Yeah. But he was healthy, and he was fit, and he was strong. But like most Irish men, sure, I'll be grand, and they won't go to the doctor. Now, he did go to the doctor, but look, back then he just had a headache, and the doctor just said, look, should take a week off work. And that's what he did. But
can I ask you, did you go back to the house and trim, and what was that like the first time walking through those doors?
I used to go in and out a little bit while he was sick, even sit on the stairs or sit on the bed. But it took till about the February. You know, and like that, Mum and Dad didn't want me to leave, you know. But by the February of the following year, I was like, no, it's time now. And I got a lodger, another girl from the travel trade, a few years younger than me, and it was a 2-bedroom house, so she had one room and I had the other, and just got back into, you know, his clothes hung in the wardrobe for a long time. His clothes actually are still in boxes in my mum's hot press, or her attic. They give out to me all the time to come take them. And it's not because I don't want to get rid of them, it just, life takes over and stuff gets in the way. And like I said, I went up into the attic before Christmas, and actually it was he would have been 50 in September, and I wanted to take out some old photos and put up photos of him in all his walks of life. And I took out this box, and it was just full of albums, because I used to put everything into photo albums, and it was full of albums and letters and stuff. And I spent weeks prior to Christmas just going through them all, and it knocked me, because reading the letters reminded me how much he loved me, and how, you know, just the connection we had. And it was nice. And you just got back into the norm with the house. I still have the house.
Do you?
Yeah. The family have been living there for 11 years. I've only stepped into it once, you know.
And you said there it was the February. A lot of people, and I was very conscious of it, especially this year, a lot of people struggle massively with grief going into a new year. Yeah.
I suppose for me, I struggle more around August, September, October, like the day he got sick, the day of his birthday. 2 days later, he passed away. We were to get married on the 9th of October 2003 in Cabra Castle. And, like, you know, I had to get my mum to get the deposit back and cancel the date. You know, like this, and all those things kind of upset me more than the new year. You know, for me, and you know, being in the travel trade, January is awesome.
Yeah.
You run on adrenaline.
Yeah.
You don't eat properly, you don't sleep properly, and you just go through January in a blink. And that's why we're sitting here in February.
Yeah.
because January is just a blur. And yeah, I look, I'm not really the whole new year, new me. You know,
we don't have time for it.
Yeah, and look, I do believe for us, for the next few months, it's going to be as hectic as January always was. And look, we deserve it. We've had a quiet, rough, you know, 22 months or whatever. But when I do stuff and I achieve stuff in work, and I'm very ambitious in work, and probably too ambitious at times, and I set myself goals, and then I've reached that, so I'll push it. But always in the back of my head is, would he be proud of me? Would he be happy? Is he looking down at me saying, well done? And his friends message me and go, he'd be so proud of you. And it's not that I do all of this for that. It's what just, I suppose, is that bit of push. That's my push, is that.
Do you think that it's what drives you? That you lost Brian?
Sometimes, yeah. I was very quiet. I was very shy. Brian was the one who would speak if we were at anything. He was just got that. He had a bigger personality than me, and I do know a lot of my strength that I found came from his passing, and I do believe, and I know I'm a very, very different person 20 years on. And some of the things I wish when he was sick, I wish when his funeral was being organised that I had a bigger voice, that I was able to stand up to other people that had bigger personalities and say, no, this is what Brian would have wanted, this is what Brian would have liked. But I just let people, because it was easier. And I think because I let that happen back then, there's this kind of a fight inside me now that says no, it's partly a reason why I walked away from my marriage, because I felt this isn't enough. Whereas the old Mandy would have accepted it as being enough. But this Mandy says, no, that's not enough. I deserve so much better. My family and friends deserve so much better. And if I'm a better person and a happier person, well, then they all are. Because I know to this day, and I do feel guilty about it, my friends and family worry still about me, because they often see me sad. But I'm not sad all the time.
No.
You know that.
No, I know.
You see me when I'm out. And I'm known to shed a tear with too many vodkas on, but sure, who doesn't?
Yeah.
But you know me.
Yeah. As I said, I wouldn't have known that thing, and you've nearly killed me with your comments today, and I wouldn't know, because when we're together we have a ball. You know what I mean? We have a ball because we're at something we love, and we're just enjoying ourselves, and we always have it. And it is hard to think that behind it all there's always a thought, and it's something that we say we never know.
You never know. The old saying, what goes on behind closed doors, and it's like people's lives, people's marriages, and they all seem perfect. Yeah. But I do know. Yeah. Because when you've lived through something, that you just say to yourself, not all that rosy, couldn't be.
Can you talk about that? And I know we'll go in, and I know we'll be careful because we've Ella and so on. But how scary is it for other people out there who are in a marriage that maybe they're not getting the love they deserve, or they're not unhappy? How scary is it to make the decision to walk away from something?
It's a huge. How I found that strength, I'll never know. And I think back to those years where I was just going through the motions, and I was just so unhappy, and I was probably still dealing with the loss of Brian as well. So then to have this thrown into the mix, and a newborn, and it was so hard. I just knew, and I suppose there was a catapultist or a catalyst in the situation that made my decision easier. And even though the couple of years after making the decision were still very hard, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of resentment, there was just a lot of nastiness. I just knew it was the right thing to do. And I hurt a little bit sometimes when Ella is talking about her friends and their mum and dad, and their friends and their mum and dad, and she has me and her dad, and we're separate, and we're completely separate. We've got no relationship at all. But she's that bit older now that it's a little bit easier. We don't have to communicate because of her age. And she has her life with me, and she has her life with her dad, and we both adore her, and she adores us both. Do you know what I mean? But it was one of the hardest things, even though considering what I'd gone through, it was is equally as tough. It really, really was. And I'm divorced since I think January 2014. And I remember I went on my own, I represented myself. I didn't have a solicitor because I couldn't afford one. And I remember my dad being outside. He'd finished work and went straight to where we were. And, you know, my dad doesn't talk. My dad's just a normal, hard-working Dublin dad. Not very affectionate. Never tell you he loved you. But he was just there outside waiting on me. And sometimes that's all it is. Just, you don't need to say anything. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's the actions, you know, and, you know, are we going for a bite to eat now?
Yeah. Do you want some tea? Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think myself, my dad went for soup and a sandwich or something locally, and I was like, right, well, now I'm divorced. On top of everything else. You know?
And how do you deal with, like, I think a lot of people as well, because I know I have a friend that's struggling a little bit, that she's gone through a separation, and now the husband, is a totally new man with his new partner.
Yeah, we don't have that really. I suppose we don't really know what the other does, but obviously through Ella, he just seems to be there for her. He works and looks after her, and I work and look after her. Neither of us have kind of gone down that route, like, do you know what I mean? Like, so I do think, yeah, I do see couples, and I would imagine it's hard for some. For me, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Because there's no feelings there.
Yeah.
At all.
Right.
At all. And hadn't been for a long time, even before we separated. So I think it wouldn't bother me. It would probably bother Ella an awful lot more than me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see why people struggle. But I just think you have to look back at why you did it. If it was your decision. I'd imagine if it wasn't your decision, then that makes it harder.
Yeah.
And then that's different altogether. But I think Ella's happiness for me is what's more important. Than it wouldn't have been good to stay in that situation. It wouldn't have been a good relationship for her to grow up in, because you knew even as a toddler the atmosphere around wasn't good. So it's not right to bring children up through all the different ages and stages. Don't get me wrong, it's hard with Ella. She's a teenager who idolises her daddy, who can do no wrong, and Mammy just provides the lunchbox and gives out about the homework and gives out about the bedroom not being tidy and at the moment. But I'm sure she'll grow out of that, like, do you know what I mean? And I hope one day she'll look and say, my Mammy worked hard for what we have to give me what I have. Maybe. Like, she knows what she wants. She's very strong. She's a Taurus, and she's a Taurus. So she's she's getting quite independent. She's doing her junior cert mocks in a few weeks.
Right.
With all that drama going on, she won't open a book. But sure, look,
she'll get there.
She'll get there in the end.
Did she, or does she know about Brian? Has she been curious as getting older about Brian?
No, she like, there's. I have one little photo of him in my bedroom in the window. It's not visible really. It's, you know, nearly tucked in behind the curtain. It's there. There's pictures of him in my mum's house and my sister's houses. Like, so they've never taken them down. And I suppose as a baby, who's that man with my mammy? So she's grown up knowing that Brian was here before your daddy, and and she knows he obviously passed away and stuff. Like, and she. The odd time, maybe over the last couple of years, she might have thrown in a question out of the blue that you'd say, Janie, where did that come from? And I just answer her honestly, like, but I do hide, like, you know, my hurt and my tears and stuff from her, because I think at that age it's very mixed up as it is. And, you know, her daddy's in one place and her mammy's in another, and I think that's enough, like, for her. But she, you know, I could tell her things if I wanted to. Do you know that way? Like, but she does know he was around, and that you know, I would never want my mum and dad to take down the photos, or my sisters, or, you know, we only had. I have a godson. He's 21 now in June, so he would have been a year old when Brian passed, and he was the only one. So the others have never met Brian, but they all know who he is. Yeah, they all know who Uncle Brian was. You know, which is, it's lovely, like, and I gave Brian's rugby shirt to Sean, and he has it hanging in a frame in his room. And
I know it didn't work out for you, but for someone else that has lost someone and is looking, did you find any judgment, or when you started?
See, I suppose I did it a bit. arseways, if I can say that. We were to go to Australia on the 12th of October on our honeymoon. So I went on my own.
Did you?
And his friends were living over there, and I decided I'd take a month off work and I would go to Australia.
What was that flight like?
Horrific. I'll never forget going through the gates in Dublin Airport and willing every ounce of me not to look back, because they were all sobbing. My mum, my dad, my sisters, my friends, my aunties, uncles, they were all sobbing their hearts out.
Did they not want you to go?
No. Because it was still only the year. And I just remember, you have to go. Just keep going. You have to do this. And his friends were waiting for me in Sydney. It was a friend from HMV days, and his beautiful girlfriend who had lived here for a while as well and hung out with me here, so I knew them. And they didn't live together even in Australia at the time. Now they're married and they've 3 beautiful kids. But I lived for 2 weeks with one and 2 weeks with the other, do you know what I mean? And funny story, a girl from school happened to be coming to Sydney around the same time that I was due to leave. So I decided, no, I'll stay a bit longer.
Okay.
And I went travelling with these girls from school who I didn't hang around with at the time, but they were in the circle, and I knew them and they knew me. And look, I suppose I just left behind here what I probably left a lot of the grief here, and it was the only way that I could deal with it. But I ended up staying in Australia for a year and a half. I never came back. I met Ella's dad. I asked my mum and dad to empty my house, rent it out. So I think I wasn't in their company for to feel the shock, or the shame, or to hear the judgment. And I was oblivious. And I was just, I was working in travel still in Sydney. I was down in the KPMG finance building at Darling Harbour, overlooking the Opera House, and I was out on yachts at the weekend, and I was just I did leave it behind. But then by coming I wanted to come home, and when I wanted to come home, Ella's dad came with me, and it was the wrong thing to do, because he didn't really want to come. He wanted to stay there, right. And I think he always resented coming home, even though he wanted to be with me, which was lovely too.
Resentment's a huge thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it just ate into the relationship. I suppose I didn't realise that coming back home would put me back into that circle of grief. And then I had to deal with having someone there who didn't want to be there because they wanted to be back in Australia. And it was bitter. It was bitter, yeah. And look, I got engaged, I got married, and I had Ella. And then I was like, right, no, I need to move on, or I just...
And did you know that quite quickly?
Yeah.
It was just, can I say, a mistake? Can I say that?
I know. I hate to say that, because Ella obviously is not a
mistake.
She's beautiful. I love her. She makes me cry and laugh every day. But I know, I hate to say that. It's hard to say that. But look, if you can't admit your mistakes, it was a mistake. Yeah. Because I was caught up in something else that made me forget.
And then you come back and it's like, bang.
Yeah.
And it's like the grief is
and then it was like, where do I live? My house was rented out. I was back with my mum and dad. And then I bought another one. So it was like, okay, well, I'll move in there. But then we moved in there, and and I got married within the year.
God.
Brian died in October 2002, and I was married by December 2005, and then Ella was born in May 2007. So it was all just very...
Yeah.
I just went with the motions. I just went with what was thought was the thing to do, and it was wrong.
But in your grief, it's just you make different decisions that are made. And
my friends would say, God, if we had said to you, you're making the biggest mistake of your life, would you have listened? But no, probably not. And to this day, I still think about some of the things that I went through, and I still go through, and I say, I've been a rubbish mum, I've been a rubbish daughter, I've been a rubbish friend, I've been a rubbish sister, And I have, but I can say that because I have, and I was horrible to everyone at some point because of grief. But I wouldn't have been horrible otherwise. But like there was some horrible moments, you know, when like everyone's lives still go on. So you have friends getting engaged and getting married and having their babies all in this such a short space of time, and you're still actually trying to cope with this huge loss. And the hardest thing I ever had to do, and I'll never forget it, was to walk up the aisle of the church that I had walked behind the coffin a few years later as a bridesmaid for my friend, knowing that I should have been walking up that aisle to marry Brian. That was one of... And I cried. Of
course you did.
And some people were annoyed. Don't cry. You can't cry, you know, for the photos, and you shouldn't. But where's the rule book?
Yeah.
Where is the rule book? It was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. And even when I look back at the photos and the beautiful bride and beautiful groom, and I was gorgeous. I was the perfect bridesmaid in my beautiful dress, and I was like a stick. There wasn't a pick on me. I didn't really eat much, probably drank too much vodka. You know, you just... And I wasn't the bestest of friends. I didn't help organise the hen, and I probably didn't do much on the day apart from put the dress on and walk up the aisle and hold the flowers. And
that was enough, Mandy.
I know, but I always look back and think I wasn't the best friend, and I wasn't the best daughter, or I wasn't the best sister.
But the thing is, all those people are still in your life.
Yeah.
They stuck with you.
Yeah.
And they stuck with you for a reason.
Yeah, and they're like my friends and family, and you know they're my everything.
I know.
You know that. Like, even the new work crowd, who are only my colleagues for the last 15 years, they didn't even know Brian. No, Brian. And they're all amazing. Some don't understand, you know. One of my closest friends now, Debbie, who I only met 8 years ago, is one of the most amazing girls you could ever meet. We have just got such a connection. We're just, you know, she gets me. And if I need to cry because of Brian, who's someone she never even met, she lets me, you know, and she listens. And I think for anyone that's struggling, just find someone that will listen, even if it's the postman. It doesn't have to be someone that, you know, you have a connection with, or someone that cares for you. Just don't keep it all inside. Just talk. And you will help you, and you will help someone else at some stage by talking. You know, you see so much sad stuff on the news. I don't really listen to the news or watch the news at all, and I haven't for years. But, you know, all the horrible things that have happened in the last 6-8 weeks here, and, you know, that lovely lady that's still missing, you know. And even though there's sightings, you still say to yourself, how sad must she be inside that she's still missing? That you would feel so maybe wrong in life, or done wrong by, that you can't talk to somebody. You know, and like I said, I know I said that about driving out in front of an Arctic, and I don't say it lightly like it's a joke. It's a horrible thing to have to say, but that's how I used to feel in the darkest days. But I just wouldn't, because I know that the support around me, and the family and the friends that have, you know, been there for me through thick and thin, and still are and will be. And even through the last 2 years, they've been there.
And I say this, I said it last time with Leah, and I'll say it again. The conversation around grief is starting to change.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether it's COVID or what it is, but there is people out there using their platforms, and I'll call her out again. It's Catty from Grief Ireland. She's the most beautiful page, and they talk about grief. So grief should be, and if you're struggling at all, maybe pop over to Catty's page, or, you know, and see what's happening there, because grief, we are talking a lot more about grief, because it was brushed under the carpet
For years.
Yeah. And it destroyed so many people in their grief.
Yeah, I've seen my mum has lost brothers and sisters, so many of them, and so young. And even her mum and dad, like her dad was knocked down when she was 15. Her mum passed away when she was 8 months pregnant with me, you know. And my mum's like a rock, you know. She's the one that keeps us all together. And through everything and our own like illnesses and ups and downs, like still wouldn't talk about feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're old school.
Yeah. It's that generation.
It is that generation, and everyone just kept everything to themselves and just, it's good to talk.
It is. Yeah. Mandy, I can't let you go without talking about the hugely successful career that you have within travel counsellors. You just have literally, taken over the world nearly with it. But you own your own business now as travel counsellor.
Yeah, I'm a self-employed travel counsellor now, 15 years this year. So it's had its ups and downs. The last 2 years have been really hard, but I love what I do. I have a passion for travel, and you know what it's like. It's just this bug that you can't get rid of. And and even in the last 2 years, where people would turn to me and say, would you not do something else? You need to earn. I thought, no, this is going to change. This is going to turn around. This is going to be fine. And I suppose I just was there for my clients, like throughout it all, and obviously I was still working and dealing through all the paperwork and the admin. So when the travel ban lifted last July, like my feet haven't touched to the ground since last July. It's been crazy. It's been busy. I love social media, and I use that platform just to show my love for travel. And every now and then I'll share a little bit of me on the pages, not much. Toby, our newbie, our dog. I've mentioned Brian like the odd time, not very often. I might throw up a picture of us, but people obviously who are my clients would just think that that's my man. They wouldn't know that he's not here anymore, or the story. But travel, I just love travel, and I love all the gang. And the Irish travel trade is very small. Yeah, it's very small, and I do always say that very male orientated, and I've always said there's a lot of them hitting retirement age in the last few years and in the next few years. And I always say, we're the chicks that are there. I've been there for the last, I'm there 28 years. That, we're going to be the ones holding together the Irish travel trade in 10, 15, 20 years time. Because the old lads will be gone. Yeah. Yeah, some of them need to go. That's terrible, but you know who you are, and I'll say it to your face as well. Yeah. But you've won accolades in that for like being the most helpful supporter and stuff like that as well. We had a few things during the last couple of years, I suppose, because we had no awards for sales and figures and reaching targets and stuff. So we had some lovely awards, and one of them was like TC Hero, and I was voted for by my colleagues for being so supportive and just positive, and being there for them and for my clients throughout all of this. And that was just like, that's amazing. It's amazing, and it's really lovely. And I think then this year was TC Champion, it was called, instead of Hero, and I won it again. So like, to win it once is huge, but to win it twice, it's just goes to show who the person you were, Mandy. But I love to help, and I do. I like, and as busy as the last 6-8 weeks have been, and they've been crazy. Huge amount of departures over Christmas, and there's a lot of hand holding needs to be going on, and I would still try and help anyone that I can. Like, I want all our colleagues, in not just travel counsellors but in the trade, to succeed, to be successful, to be happy in what they do, and to get back the love that they had for travel, because a lot of us lost it. Yeah. A lot. Yeah. And even me, I had my days where I cried a river. That, is this worth it? Yeah. But we know it is. It is. And it is. It's hard to see fallen colleagues, but like, I think you'll stick with it because you'll stick with it. Because when you're thinking about that mojito or that porn star martini by the beach. Tell me your favourite, in the world is your oyster. Where is the place you're going? Well, I have a huge passion, and everyone knows this, for the Maldives and for the Seychelles. My most memorable trip was November 2018. Myself and two of my colleagues went to the Seychelles for a week and did 6 or 7 of the different islands. Wow. And it was just the most special, most amazing trip. It was just really fabulous, and we had an absolute ball, and I'll always treasure that. Like, but anywhere that's new. I've plans for the summer, plans for Easter. Plans for the Maldives for October. I've plans in place for 2022 because, look, we got to go nowhere, and you know, I'll go anywhere. I actually have a thing about going somewhere twice.
Right.
I don't generally go somewhere twice because there's so many places, but I actually am going back to the Maldives in October. It will be my second time, but the first time was through work, so I want to go as a
Kurramati.
as a holiday, and I'm going to Kurramati, and I'm bringing my sister. So,
And Brian will be with you.
Yeah, he's with me all the time. He is, and we're actually going. We were going to go the first weekend in October, and I says, "No, Brian is 20 years gone. We need to mark it. We're going to organise a big walk somewhere. Don't know where, Wicklow Mountains, whatever. I'm going to ask everybody I know, everybody you know, to come and walk with us for Brian. We're going to raise some money for Headway Ireland and the Brain Injury Association, and just donate it to them. We just walk for 5 or 6k, nothing big, just all get together and walk in memory of Brian and everything that he was, and just try and get as many people as we can to walk. So that's the plan for 1st of October this year, and then myself and my sister fly out the following week.
And Mandy, come here, can I ask you the last thing, because it is quite surreal when you do see it on like Blue Blood CSI, like in the Fallen Officer, that moment of you walking and seeing the uniform lined up there and being there.
Yeah.
Does that stay with you?
Yeah, I'll never ever forget it. I don't even remember the faces, but I just remember the blue and the shirt and the trousers and the shoes and them all outside the gates, and they were all down the corridors of the Mater Hospital, and just, you know, they all just looked so lost, and me not knowing what it was, and it was like a scene from a movie, walking into the A&E and just, you know, as I said, they handed me the rings. I wore them, holding them with my other finger for 7 weeks, to the point that I had to get physio to put my hand back right. They fell down the side of the bath in my mum's house one of the nights, like I was there, and I was hysterical that my dad had to literally come up to the house and come upstairs and take the bath out to get them.
Oh my God.
I've never taken them off me. One is a History of Ireland ring that I bought him as a Valentine's present, and the other one we bought in Hersonis in Crete, in a little jewellery shop on a holiday when I was probably 20, so it's 25, 26 years old.
Wow.
And look, they're still there. I'll always carry them in my heart, and I always carry them in my smile. He had a huge smile, he had a huge handshake, he had a huge heart, and that is why he wasn't gone in 24 hours, and that's why I was able to say to the doctor, you don't know him, he's not leaving here in 24 hours, and I was right. But I'll tell you one thing, and I forgot to mention this. I used to always say to Brian, you won't live till you're 40. I don't know why, I don't know how, but Brian lived life to the max. He lived it on full throttle. He had written off a brand new Golf the year before, like, and came out without a scratch. And I remember that time a year before having to go in and see him strapped up in a bed. I remember saying to him that day, I think it was a Sunday, that's your warning to slow down. That's your warning to, you know, take a step back. You know, always in a rush, always in a hurry, always living life to the max. And I just always had this gut feeling from the time that I met Brian that he was never going to live till he was 40. I don't know where it came from. I just always knew. So I think, and when people say to me, do you only ever get one soulmate in your life? I think you only get one soulmate in your life. I think you meet other people that make you happy, and then you meet other people that will love you and you will love them. But do you only have one soulmate? I think, yeah. And he was mine. Yeah, he was mine.
You're going to remember him. It's 20 years with a walk. Yeah. Okay, well, let us know about that, won't you?
Will do, yeah.
And on that note, Mandy, we leave it there.
Thank you.
Because you have a lovely night out to get yourself ready for.
Thanks.
But thank you so much for sitting down with me.